When I was younger, like up until high school, I was I was very like hyper competitive, like super competitive, and I was also very like I guess maybe insecure to a certain degree, like that might have where it came from. I was always like I was getting in fights regularly, not like major like anything major, but guys that I disagreed with, and it would be normal for me to fight. And for me, it was kind of in my environment, it was kind of strange because I didn't like grow up in like any kind of like area where guys are fighting all the time. It was norm. I went to a Catholic middle school, and there was like 25 of us in my graduating class, maybe even less. And so like the people I fought like the same people regularly, and it would be like a fight would be like 10-15 seconds long. It would just be like I remember there was one kid that lived on my street. We would walk up the street, and I remember one day, for whatever reason, we were arguing about something, and he was walking up the street. I took my backpack full of books and just did the old whip it behind my head, and boom, like basically knocked him out right in front of his house. Ran up the street because I didn't want any more of them. And then the next day, one day he tackled me into the snow and was holding my face, and so just like stuff like that. I have no idea why, but like I was always like fighting. I was in these little like kid scraps. In high school, I mellowed out. Just like I got to high school, and it's funny because I say like my name changed. Everybody called me Andrew. I got to high school, and everybody called me Andy. Like just for whatever reason, in high school, people give you a nickname. Everybody called my name shifted. Now I was Andy, and my mom always joked. She was just like, "You're still Andy." I'm like, no, I'm Andy now. And even to this day, like now I can still call myself Andy. And my personality changed too. Like I was extremely mellow. Like for you to rile me up about anything was even now, like even as a fighter, like you're pretty hard pressed to get me angry about something. I guess it's just part of growing up, but very very mellow. And then I still a little competitive, but I was still like I started skateboarding and snowboarding. I was just kind of living that kind of life. But I've always been a little bit separated from like friends. Like I have some close friends. I had a group of friends, and like whatever, it wasn't like antisocial, but I was always more focused on whatever I was doing. And like I was skateboarding, and all of a sudden like I wanted to compete in the X Games. I was snowboarding. I was like, I'm gonna get sponsored, start competing. Like I was always just and that was my focus. And if you weren't on board with that, like I would eventually kind of like part ways with friends. So like I didn't really carry most of my friends into my like later life. Like now I see friends from high school, but I don't really have any close friends from high school because of it. And and then I picked up martial arts when I was 16 years old. So it wasn't like I was that old. It wasn't like later in life. I picked up martial arts when I was 16, and it was like from there it was just like that became my life. And thank God it was. Thank God it did, because I just found so much. Like everything that I was looking for in terms of like the competitiveness, in terms of like the kind of people I wanted to be around, because that was it. I think like in high school, like especially like as a skateboarder, like all my friends are smoking weed on the weekends, and they're living for the weekends and drinking, and like just living this crazy life. And I was never interested in it for whatever reason. I was always more interested in it. I was like, well, that's even back then, I talk about like that noise. Like I recognized back then, I was like, that's not constructive towards my goal. I have this goal, and what's constructive towards that. So that's always kind of like what my level of thinking was. And then martial arts was like the answer to all of that. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in particular for me. Eventually mixed martial arts, but it was like the answer. It was me, finding that group of peers that were all like, had that positive attitude, that like setting goals for themselves, looking to achieve those goals. I was surrounded by other guys that wanted to compete, wanted to do well, and eventually when I found the fight team, the pro fight team, I mean that was really when it for me it was like I clicked with these guys, and it just made sense. And it wasn't like we didn't have to go get drunk on the weekend to have fun. You wanted to have fun, you showed up with your gloves on and your hands wrapped. Like that's how you did it. That's how you had fun. And for me, that's what it was about. that's why I fell in love with the martial arts lifestyle so much. And most of my friends were adults. Most of my friends were in their 20s and their 30s, and just focused on, they're already getting married, and they have kids, and they have responsibilities, and so most of my peers had responsibilities that like most 16-year-old kid peers don't have. Most 16-year-old kid peers are just, like I said, living for the weekend. So I had these peers, and I think it matured me faster. And I remember when I was younger, people always talking about like instructors. I remember Ricardo Almeida in particular. Back then, I mean, he's still young now. I think he's only like 32 maybe. But, going back 7-8 years, 26 years old or so, 26, 25 years old, and he had opened his school already. And I remember some of my training partners who were like in their 30s, and I said, man, I'll go train with Ricardo, and I remember I trained with Ricardo, and you would talk to him, and it was almost as if he was like years and years older than you. Like he had this maturity about him and I don't think it was because he was, mature in particular. I think it was just that like now that I'm, like I see like the guys who stick with martial arts and really like kind of let it grow, like grow with it, or have it like they grow in this world. There's just like a different level of thinking. It's just because there's structure to your life, whether or not there's structure in your real world. In here there's always structure, which some people don't have. There's that, like I said, that positive based, attitude that's always like every day. There's the character building in terms of like the success and failures. I always talk about people with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I'm like, you want character building? I was like, come in here. I was like, you'll succeed and you'll fail. You'll get tapped and you'll get a submission 20, 30, 40 times in 1 hour. Most people might get 1 or 2 feelings like that in a week. It's for anybody, and the people that stick with it, it's definitely the people that allow themselves to be kind of absorbed into the atmosphere, and generally, you don't find people that are doing mixed martial arts for even a year or 2 years, nevertheless 8 or 9 or 10 years, that are not positive. You're hard pressed to like find me a mixed martial arts gym that's got guys who've been training for 10 years and they're no fun to be around. It's never the case. People walk into an MMA gym, especially a gym like mine. I mean, my gym is even more different than the average MMA gym. You walk into my gym and you're like, man, this feels like a house almost with a big mat on it. And when somebody meets me, oh, what do? You're a fighter? You're a fighter? That's what I love. That's like my favorite thing, is every person that meets me that doesn't know me previously, and I'm talking to them and this and that, oh, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a professional fighter. And the first thing every time, you're a fighter? You're a fighter? And for me, that's a compliment. Mm-hmm. It's like, good that I did my job, because I don't want it to be what you thought a fighter was. Mm-hmm. I want it to be, like, yeah, I'm a nice guy. I'm professional in terms of how I talk. I'm educated and to a degree, and like well spoken and just positive, and I fight, and it's fun for me. And there's a lot of, and now let me explain to you why you don't need to fight, but why you should get involved in martial arts. And what happened was, actually, after I was on The Ultimate Fighter, I had a fight. I had a huge weight cut. I used to cut a lot more weight than I do now. And I got really sick. I mean, I came down with mono. I didn't know I had mono, so I was training while I had mono. Basically depleted my immune system. My doctor told me I might not fight anymore. Not because I wasn't physically able to. Like, I could train, but it was like every single time I would start to train, if you know anything about, how, like, working out or anything like that, you break down to build up. So I couldn't afford to break down. I couldn't do a hard training session because basically what little immune system I had left would shut off, and then I would get sick almost 100% of the time. Shingles, old people, elderly people get shingles, and people with very low immune system. I broke out with shingles, and most people get shingles once or twice in their life. I would get shingles once a month, and every time if I would go for a run, I'd break out with shingles. So I was at a point where, I would do everything I can. I would take this medicine, I would eat this, and I would train a certain way, and everybody was telling me to do different things. And I And then I would be feeling kind of good. I would take some time off. I'd start training for a fight. Bam! I'd get hit with shingles, or I'd get a cold, or I'd get a flu, or whatever. And I had no immune system. So I basically was, I would train. I got to the point where I would actually start training for fights and say, forget it. Like, I'll fight sick. Like, I don't care. I'm gonna fight. I still want to fight. This is my career. And I've been training for 8 years for this, and now it's like I'm not gonna stop now. It's not like I'm 7-1. Like, I'm there, And then I started studying. I'm trying different things, and then I actually talked with my friend Jonathan Brookins, who won my season of the show, and he was like, we're talking about it. I'm explaining, like, man, it's so frustrating, this and that, and he says to me, he's like, did you ever think about like simplifying rather than like what you think you need? Try to start thinking about what you don't need. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, if I were you, he's vegan, he's just a plant-based athlete. He was like, if I were you, I would cut out everything except for the necessities and then add back in. So I did, and I went 100% vegan, gluten-free, everything. Just cut out everything. And within a month, I knew that I was back. I literally was like, I felt different. I was like, something's different. I think I'm going to be okay this time. I knew it, and 3 months later, I was back in the cage. And it was amazing because I had done all these medicines, all these different, and I was back in the cage. And I started to just apply that to everything in life. I just started to think and like kind of create this concept of like, well, like there's so much noise in our life. And I think that diet is more than just what you eat. It's what you consume and how much you're taking in. It's what you watch. It's what you eat. It's what you consume on all levels. It's what you don't hear also. Like people talk about noise all the time with people. I'm like, how much noise is in your life? I'm like, what are you talking? I'm like, noise. Like, what do you like? You might be missing things because you're hearing everything else. You might not realize that you sit down and you watch a TV show and you watch the TV show. That's as far as you consider it. But if you start to think about that everything that you take in is a part of your diet, then you start to look at things differently. Like for somebody who might is trying to search for that motivation or whatever, or they're just, they're feeling like, maybe somebody who's a little bit depressed. Like I haven't been in everybody's shoes, but I just know for me, I've hit a lot of those walls because believe me, I was depressed when I couldn't fight for almost 2.5 years. After I remember I retired because I had finally made it to a fight, not perfect, but I finally made it to a fight. And the night of the fight, the doctor looked at me, looked in my eyes. I had a little bit of like the shingle residue, but it was supposedly gone. And that night I was sitting in the bathroom crying my eyes out because they told me that they weren't going to let me fight again. And I had just trained for I think it was my 6th or 7th fight that I wasn't allowed to fight for. So, I've been in a lot of those spots, and I've just realized how if you start to just understand everything that you consume affects who you are and how you're healthy and everything else, it can make a big difference in life, and especially for an athlete. But it's not just for athletes, it's for everybody who's trying to just live a kind of a healthy life on all playing fields.